Hi everyone, my name is Ted Bauman. I'm editor of the Bauman Letter here at Banyan Publishing. Now you'll notice that I'm wearing a t-shirt today rather than the normal shirt with a collar that I normally wear, and that's because it's got a message that I think is important for the series that we're going to be embarking on today. In this series I'm going to be talking about problems in the US economy, problems that are not related so much to the stock market as they are to the structure of the economy, problems that hold us back, problems that make us feel that things are our fault, that are really not our fault at all. They're the fault of the structure of the economy and the failure of our lawmakers and those in power to do anything about it. I'm also going to talk about ways you can address these problems yourself in your daily life. Let's start with a few questions. You ever felt like the cost of basic stuff is actually so high that you really don't have enough money left over to do the things you want to do, like go on vacation or buy stuff for your grandkids? Things like your cell phone bill, your cable bill, maybe your internet connection. Really expensive stuff. I know it is for me. Do you maybe have kids still living at home because they can't afford to move out because they have huge college loans and the salaries on offer are not so big? Or maybe you know friends who do? Do you know somebody who's maybe been bankrupted by medical bills or has had their retirement ruined because they had to spend their savings just to cope with a medical emergency? Maybe it even happened to you. Well, the bottom line is those things are not your fault. And the truth is, if you lived in a lot of countries around the world, those things would never happen. Countries that are free, countries that have capitalist markets, countries that have markets that actually do everything that we want markets to do. Let's start with a story before I explain why this is happening in the United States. Right now in the United States, on average, if you have a cell phone package of about 5 gigabytes data a month, you'll probably pay around $62, just for one phone, mind you. On the other hand, if you lived in a country like China, it would be around $49. Japan, only $42. Britain, $33. Germany, $35. Look at France, $15. Australia, $12. Denmark, $7. These are countries and economies and industries where the companies providing these services are still making a decent profit. They're good companies. They're not subsidized by anybody, but yet their prices are dramatically lower than ours. And why is that the case? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but here's a surprise. There is one country in the world that does have a higher cell phone cost than we do. Guess where it is? Very close to the United States. Cuba. That's right. A communist-controlled economy with a cell phone service that is controlled by the government and a government company is the only country that has higher cell phone service costs than we do here in the United States. Why on earth would that be the case? Well, the bottom line is that the cell phone market in the United States is not competitive. It's dominated by a few giant companies, right? Just like the market for internet broadband, because they tend to be the same companies. And there are other industries that have the same problem. In fact, since the 1980s, competition in the United States has declined precipitously. The average market share for the top 8 firms in any given industry has risen from about 50% in the early 1990s to around 60% today. That means that smaller companies are being driven out, fewer companies are being formed to take on the challengers, the existing companies, and prices are basically increasing. Now, why would that happen? Well, when companies don't have much competition, they can afford to charge the prices that they like. They basically become the controllers of toll booths. If you want a cell phone, great, we'll give you one, but you have to pay the price we set. Where else are you going to go? Here where I live in Atlanta, there isn't a lot of competition for broadband service. I really only have 2 options. And those 2 options are not competitive. And unsurprisingly, the prices are high. And the prices are about the same for the both of the 2. They don't compete on that. They don't have to, right? Now, what's been happening over the last decade, couple of decades really, is that this has happened across many different parts of the US economy. Different industries have become more concentrated with fewer and fewer companies dominating them. And it's not just because of things like new technologies like Facebook and Google. We're talking about old industries, industries that emerged out of things like the telephone business, the electricity business, etc. Companies that are big not because of the natural nature of their markets, but because they've been able to take profits that they earned and use them to manipulate the markets that they operate in to become more powerful. Things like making donations to politicians, things like using control over local publicly owned resources like telephone and lighting poles to make sure that competitors can't compete with them. I'm going to be talking about this in more detail in the future installations of this particular video series. But for this one, the message I want to leave you is this. This is costing you a lot of money. The average American family pays $5,000 per year in higher prices for the everyday things that we need simply because of the uncompetitive nature of markets in the United States. This is something that has been brewing for a long time, and it's something that neither one of the two major political parties have shown any inclination to do anything about. And yet it is something that affects all of us, whether we are red or blue, Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is that money is being taken out of our pockets as a result of the lack of competition in this economy, and it doesn't have to be this way. It could change. So for the rest of this video series, in future installments, I'm going to be talking about why this is the case, industry by industry, and what you can do about it. This is Ted Bauman signing off. I'll talk to you again in next week's installment. Take care.